Right, good morning. Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Sorry about the delay in starting, but I think we're kick-off. We'll try and keep this session concise. I'd love to have some questions from the audience during this panel discussion on privatization, plans, approaches, and achievements. As you'll all be aware, the privatization of state-owned assets is an important feature of the government's 2030 strategy, intended to bring private capital into these organisations, as well as increased efficiency. And if done correctly, widen wealth through share ownership, thank you, and raising revenue for the government's broader priorities, including, of course, health and education and other social priorities. I'm Andrew Hayes. I'm the managing partner at Hudson Sandler. We are a strategic communications and sustainability and consulting firm based in London, but with offices internationally and a thriving office here in Tashkent, which we established over 2 years ago and is proven to be extremely successful given all the opportunities here. We have a fantastic client list, including 2 clients that are very relevant to this conversation, Navoy and Franklin Templeton. So there's 2 of our clients particularly relevant to this discussion. I'm delighted to have such a distinguished panel to join us today. We have Akmal Orikov. He's been director of the State Assets Management Agency of the Republic of Uzbekistan since 2020, following a ministerial career where he was first Deputy Minister of Economic Development and Poverty Reduction. We have Enrico Pinali. He's Regional Head, Private Sector Development at the Asian Development Bank, where he advises on a wide range of finance solutions, including public-private partnerships. We have Tariq Nizami. He's founder and CEO of CEO Clubs Network Worldwide, a US-based organization that is the largest business networking club in the world, and I'm sure you're all members, or you should be. Delighted to have my old friend David Gottlieb here. He's a partner at Cleary, Gottlieb, Steam and Hamilton, where he focuses on international capital markets and cross-border M&A transactions, including IPOs, sovereign high-yield debt offerings, and of course privatizations. We have Alan Nuke. He's Regional Industry Manager, Financial Institutions for Central Asia and Turkey at the International Finance Corporation, having also been a senior banker over many years at both Citigroup and Standard Chartered Group. And finally, but by no means least, delighted to have another very old friend, Giovanni Salvetti. He's a partner and head of CIS region at Rothschild & Company, advising governments for many years worldwide and private sector organizations on many transactions, including, of course, privatizations. As many of you will be aware, this discussion follows the law on privatization of state property passed last year, which established a privatization process to be managed by the State Assets Management Agency with the ambition of addressing the state's heavy involvement in the economy as it transitions more and more to a market-driven economy. The law envisaged shares being put up for auction in a staggering 241 enterprises and envisaged IPOs and SPOs of 12 large enterprises, including, of course, Navoy Mining. And recently, we've seen the establishment of the investment fund of Uzbekistan, managed by Franklin Templeton, which has interest, I think, in 18 state enterprises with a value at the current time of 1.6 million on a journey to IPO listing internationally, the fund itself, as well as over time those assets. So there's a lot happening. It's a very ambitious program. Is a very, very important part of the reform program. So my first question, Akmal, is a very simple one. How is the privatization program progressing? And is progress where the State Assets Management Agency anticipated it would be when the privatization law was passed?
Assalamu alaikum, hurmatli.
Good afternoon, dear participants of the panel session, dear speakers. We have started on a very fair point. First of all, what do we need to start the privatization? As our speaker has said, in Uzbekistan in the previous year, we have adopted a new law on privatization. And according to this law actually encompasses the best of the practices of the international financial expertise, with advice of EDB, ADB, and we work together on this matter, and we have introduced it into life. What is very important for any foreign investor? The rule of law. The answer is rule of law. Let us say till 2024, we have been living according to the laws that has been introduced in 1994. And this law was not about putting anything into the private sector, but it was setting it out of the state governance. So even the name was not eloquent enough. And that's why it was very important for us to adopt this law, both for local and for foreign investors. And I would like to mention another law about the management of the state equity. And according to that, we have been independent for 30 years, more than 30 years, and we had never seen such a law. With this law, the function of the government, what strengths and what can actually the government do, the do's and don'ts of the government has been set very clearly in the framework of this law. And we know that this doesn't exist in all of the countries. This law can exist only in such countries where private sector and the governmental sector do have these distinctions. They are clear-cut, they are coherent, the cooperation between them is clear-cut, and the management of these processes are done in a quite professional level. And from this point of view, our dear President, His Excellency, introduced this law. And talking about this privatization, we have got this law on investigation and activity on investigation. And this is something which secures the rights of the people who wants to show in the private investment. In the last 4 years, we had a huge amount of privatization. You can see on the slide the results of privatization in numbers, and you can see the dynamics. And most part of this privatization, the blue ones are the money that were obtained and the income, and the white part is a sales volume. And this is something that we are doing year by year. Until 2025, we are planning to have a lot of, we are quite ambitious. And I would like to draw your attention to one number. In the last 4 years and in the past period of 2025, 47 trillion sums, more than 80,000 shares have been sold that used to relate to the government. And the president has created such comfortabilities, some conditions where the state organizations could sell some of their objects, some of their buildings or equity, which was not being in use. And for that reason, the governmental companies themselves, they were able to create, to sell it directly. Before that, we had a question where exactly to sell this kind of things. And our president, His Excellency, gave the solution to this as well. So we have got eauction.uz, and you can be using this platform. And even the countries that have got even the government's companies, they got more than 8 trillion by selling their shares that were not in use. sharing their material basis, and through this privatization. And more than 4.5 million actives was sold in this part. In Uzbekistan, we have got Development Strategy 2030. And according to the strategy, we have got quite objectives to complete, to reach. Till 2030, we are expected to increase shares of the private sector to 85% and decrease the number of state-owned organizations to 6 times. And to do this, what is our task? What should we do? Each year, we are supposed to observe the state-owned organizations or state-owned companies, and we need to identify those shares that are the subject of the privatization. We need to confirm them and allow to be privatized. Every year, starting from 2021, according to the due to the presidential decrees, we are confirming, we are defining the conclusions, the resolutions on privatization. Recently, in April, there were another set of the decrees, and this is another stimuli for us to privatize more than 600 buildings and government companies. We need to privatize them. Privatization has to happen to them. And you know that in Uzbekistan we have got the land which is not suitable for the agriculture, for farming. And these lands are supposed to be used in these ways as well. And specifically in 2024, through the auctioning system, more than 4,000 hectare land was sold to the private sector. People are so interested in buying land in the auction because it is transparent process. They are participating in it. And in this year, in the last 5 months of this year, we have made for 2.5 trillion sums out of the selling of this land. And you can see it on the slide as well. We had some bigger shares and actives. You can see the numbers. You can see how big are they. And this is history, of course. And we still have to go along. And during this year, as we have already said it about, we need to increase the number of privatization to $10 trillion, and make an income of that for the 40 trillions. And according to the acknowledged program, we need to start the selling of the active, appealing active of Mobi.uz. This is one of the first and largest communication operators in Uzbekistan. 100% of share, government share, and this is going to be international selling part. And we already declare that in this selling process we are going to have international entrepreneurs, and we have asked the Rothschild Co. investigation company for the sales. And this Rothschild's company, we want to thank them one more time for their will to participate in it, because with Rothschilds, the last time we worked was selling of Coca-Cola company state shares. And there was a huge amount of money actually, and we are planning to have this kind of lucky deal in with the help of the Rothschilds investment company, in the sales of the Mobius as well. And of course, this is a process which is important both for local and international executors, and we are making sure we're solid in the way that it's everything going to be transparent and lawful. Very soon, from the actives in the financial sector, we have got Uzbekistan insurance company, and Market Sorda. We are planning to start sales of these companies, and nowadays we are working with a consulting company from Big Four, Deloitte company, in selling of these two actives, and we are on the finishing line already. And in this new program, we have got 29 big actives, and one of them is heating electric stations, energy industry. These are the main stations, main companies that produce energy in Uzbekistan. How should we privatize them? We are having communications with KPMG. They are working out the privatization strategy for us on this, and very soon they are going to give us their final suggestions on this. And there's 10 heating electro stations. So, and we have got even more actives like hotels and other actives. For example, in Uzavtosanoat, the rare or spare parts, selling of the spare parts production. And this is something that we are suggesting to the entrepreneurs, and this is very good implication to life of the decree of the His Excellency Mr. President. And of course, for those of the investors who would like to participate in it from abroad, we have got specific comforts for them using depositariums, for participation in e-auction. We are creating these conditions for them. And a lot of people can ask a question, for example. We have got UzAuto Motors powertrain companies. How are you planning to sell them? How are the sales are going to happen? And in this part, we need to understand the brand name, with the General Motors, with the GM. We need to completely follow the contracts. We have to study and make our research on the legislative documentation, and we are going to follow the advice that are given by our lawyers. Till 2030, this is another number that you need to know. Till 2030, on what we are going, we are going to decrease the state share. 2,500 companies with state shares. We have already sold 500 of them, and about 2,000 of them were either stopped, finished, or changed their judicial state, let us say. And nowadays we have got about 800 companies, 800 actives that are ready already to start the selling processes. And these 2,200 companies are going to decrease the number of this number 2,200 is going to decrease till 2030. Of course, private sector is going to get developed, and this would be something very interesting and important for everybody. Thank you.
Thank you, Director, very much for your very comprehensive answer and a wealth of opportunities, obviously, with the privatisation programme, and very reassuring to hear about the government and the agency's commitment to a stable regulatory environment. Let me now, privatisations, of course, were privatised in the UK by Margaret Thatcher, my heroine, or perhaps Chile a few years earlier, and in the 1980s, and many countries across the globe have put programmes in place, often with very, very mixed results. So let me ask Giovanni Salvetti, what lessons are to be learned from the experiences of other countries where the government's advisor was very likely to have been Rothschild? Yes.
No, yes. Oh, first of all, thank you, Andrew, and thank you to the organizer for having invited me to speak about privatization, which clearly is probably today the hottest topic in Uzbekistan, so it's a big privilege. And just before getting to the history a bit of privatization, allow me to spend 30 seconds about myself. I've been working for Rothschild for the last over 20 years. Actually, I'm looking at this picture. I think I need probably to update it because it looks like now Dorian Gray type of thing. So I need probably an update. I've been around for quite some time, and at Rothschild I'm responsible for the CIS region, and it's an area where we are extremely active. We did a transaction in excess of $100 billion in this region in the last 15 years, meaning M&A, IPOs, and privatization. And thank you, Mr. Hortikov, for reminding about the big success we had with Coca-Cola, and hopefully we can beat this success with Mobius, which we have just been awarded, and other projects as well. And by the way, it was not a matter of lucky deal. Actually, it was well prepared together with you, run in a very transparent way, and with a very strong competitive tension. That was the result of the deal. Now, you are right, Andrew, that Rothschild is traditionally been the advisor of choice of governments for privatization. Different reasons. First of all, we are one of the leading independent financial advisors, so we don't have conflict of interest. Easy for governments to hire us. But second, as you mentioned, we have been the first advising on the British privatization with Margaret Thatcher. And maybe let me spend a few seconds on this, because what Margaret Thatcher did in the 80s, in the middle of a very difficult economic, social situation with social unrest, stagnation, inflation, she decided to privatize most of the companies which were under the control of the UK government at the time. And this might seem brave now, but at the time it was absolutely revolutionary because it was not done before. So basically all companies which started with British were put up for sale. British Gas, British Telecom, British Petroleum, British Airways, British Coal, British Steel, you name it. Everything was put up for sale, and it was absolutely revolutionary. Why they were doing this? I mean, pretty obvious. They wanted to raise revenues for the budget. They wanted to improve probably as well the efficiency of state-run companies. And third, they wanted to spread capitalism around the society, not only for big investors, but throughout the society. And I would say that grossly, the program was quite successful. British Airways became one of the most successful airlines in the world in the 90s, and the UK government raised £60 billion at the time from selling shares in British Airways. Other privatization were less successful. Think about British Rail or some utilities, where a lot of inefficiencies were created. But overall, it was successful. And if you think about why London became and is today one of the financial capital of the world, both in the legal and financial system, is because there was this privatization pattern which started there. And I think in this respect, all people which work in this industry with me, they should be thankful to what Margaret Thatcher did at the time. Now, after that, due to the success of this, organizations like the IMF or the World Bank started promoting privatization worldwide, and Italy followed, France, Spain, you name it. With also quite degrees of success. Creation of a Italian stock exchange was built around few state companies which went there. France, we can say something similar. Now, getting closer to the region where we are, if you think about Central Eastern Europe and Russia, in this period in the 90s, a lot of privatization programs were launched there as well. And you have seen that, for instance, in Central Eastern Europe, privatization were quite successful, also because they were benefiting from the improved regulation, which was a result of some of these countries joining the European Union. In Russia, the experience was much less fortunate because it was run through loan to shares dodgy schemes, which created today's infamous category of oligarchs with negative effects for economy and general society in Russia. Now, overall, over 40 decades, I think the patterns of when restructuring are successful and when they are not are kind of clear. So privatization are very successful when markets are competitive. It's hard to privatize natural monopolies. It's difficult. I mean, it's easy, but it has negative consequences. Privatization works well when regulation is strong and they bring problems when the regulation is weak. They need to be run, of course, transparently. It goes without saying. And also, they are more sensitive when regards essential services, utilities, water, energy, healthcare. They are very sensitive sectors to privatize, with possible consequences which are not necessarily positive for the country which is implementing them. When it comes, you can. It also depends from the sectors. If you take the financial sector, in the 90s, Central Eastern Europe, they sold. Some of the countries sold all banks, state banks, to foreign investors. But when the global financial crisis came, it happened that the state, as a lender of last resort, wasn't able really to support the local companies because foreign owners of the bank were not particularly inclined to support and capitalize the local banks. So what happened is that some of these banks have been renationalized since then. And when I meet governments regarding privatization of banks, I always say them that it's very good to privatize the banking sector, but always keep one or two banks under state control because it might be needed. COVID also showed the limits of privatization in healthcare, where a state-run healthcare system has responded to the pandemic in a much more effective way. So overall, it's hard to say that privatization are good or bad. I think governments need to take a pragmatic approach and not a dogmatic approach. Privatizations are a tool, and it depends how they are used, in which context, and for the benefit of which category. And when it comes to Uzbekistan, I've seen, of course, a very successful work of Mr. Ortikov, and which we have enjoyed collaborating with since many years. I think, though, that the country has been a bit closed for historical reason until the current presidency, and is not very well known to retail investor and big funds, equity funds, in Wall Street, in Hong Kong, and it's not very well known as a country. So I think if there would be a couple of significant big companies partially privatized through IPOs, where international investor can make money, can trade, this would be very helpful for putting Uzbekistan on the map of international equity investors, with a spillovers benefit for all the rest of the economy. Thank you.
Thank you, Giovanni. And I think I know the government's very focused on making sure the story and the narrative around new Uzbekistan is told internationally. There's a big commitment to that, but it's actually crucial that investors understand more about what's happening here. So let me, there are all sorts of methods of privatization, as Giovanni's pointed out, from public share offerings on stock markets, trade sales to strategic investors, or to management, or employee buyouts, or indeed a combination of any of these mechanisms. Let me ask David Gottlieb on the merits and drawbacks of different privatization methods including the possible impact on proceeds and corporate performance of each. And let me just, before you answer, David, I just want to let people know David has to go to another panel, so he may get up and leave at some point. It's not because he's cross, it's because he's got to go to another panel. So David, over to you. David, your red light needs to be, you need to press your speaker.
There we go. Спасибо, Andrew. И, уважаемые дамы и господа,
Ladies and gentlemen, my name is David Gottlieb. I am a partner of a law firm, Cleary Gottlieb, and I'm very happy to be here. And now I will switch into English so that you don't have to listen to my Russian.
for inviting me to participate. I'm pleased to join this very important discussion. As a legal advisor who's worked on privatizations, as Giovanni has in Russia, across Central and Eastern Europe, in the UK, I've seen how profoundly the method of privatization and the quality of the process can influence economic performance of the asset, investor interest in investing in the asset in the region, and public trust. What I see today in Uzbekistan is a very serious, deliberate approach to privatization. It's focused not just on short-term revenue, but on long-term reform. And I have to say, from where I'm sitting, that's very encouraging. So let's talk a little bit about the different methods of privatization. The first, as Andrew said, is a public share offering, or IPO. IPOs are probably the most transparent method of privatizing a company. They allow broad participation, broad market participation. They foster true price discovery, so at least in theory should maximize value of the asset. But they also require companies to meet higher standards in the area of corporate governance and also disclosure, public market scrutiny, which many of these private companies, or any private company indeed, wouldn't be accustomed to. In Russia, that really wasn't the way privatization began. As Giovanni was saying, IPOs came really only later with very large companies like Sberbank, Rosneft, VTB. Those are some prime examples. There were years of preparation, and the public offerings helped open the companies to the global capital markets. These listings often attracted better valuations because the companies had reached a certain level of maturity, and both in their governance and in their reporting and in their profit base. In Uzbekistan, there are a number of upcoming IPOs, as we've heard already, and I think what's especially encouraging is there does seem to be an emphasis on preparation. So companies are hiring auditors, they're going through the restructuring process. They're being advised by global firms like our firm, like Rothschild, like global accounting firms. And that's really the right sequence. The IPO should be a culmination of reform, not a shortcut to capital. Looking next at trade sales. So trade sales can be faster and are often ideal when you want to bring in a strategic partner who is offering not just capital to the company, but operational improvements, an international network, and technology, and also human capital, things that may be in short supply in a region where there isn't a long tradition of public companies. In Russia, we saw many trade sales helped modernize the heavy industry in that country, the energy sector. But often they weren't sales that were competitive or very transparent, and therefore the outcomes were mixed. That's a lesson that many frontier markets have had to learn over the years and absorb. And I think Uzbekistan, it seems, has learned from those mistakes of other countries and is approaching it again in the right way. The recent sale we heard about of Coca-Cola, Uzbekistan, is a positive example. I wasn't involved with it, but from all the reports, it was a well-run competitive process. Of course, it was Rothschild was involved, with a credible international buyer. We understand trade sales will still be a part of the process here, with firms like IFC and Rothschild continuing, and these partnerships can help with both valuation, but also post-sale performance. and can be a segue to an eventual IPO. On the management buyout fronts, these were a major feature of the Russian privatization landscape, especially in the 1990s. They helped with political acceptance of privatization because you were giving it to the people who were involved in the enterprise, and continuity, obviously, of management. But in many cases, the insiders involved in those companies lacked capital and didn't have access to capital, or really the strategic know-how to develop the companies, and performance therefore stalled on many of the MBOs and EBOs. That said, I think this method can still work well. It works well for smaller firms or sectors where local knowledge and employment continuity are really important. It's good for regional services, hospitality, agriculture, those sorts of firms. So in Uzbekistan, there will be a role to play, I think, for these types of privatizations in smaller scale contexts, particularly if they can be paired with financing and potential later buy-in from external investors. Finally, you have what Andrew described, I think, as the phased or hybrid approach. This is actually where Uzbekistan seems to be building its own best practice, using phased, carefully sequenced transactions. One example, which we saw earlier, was the Ipoteka Bank transaction, where OTP Group, a Hungarian bank, was brought in as a strategic investor, supported by other IFIs, and reportedly they are now preparing for a second stage IPO. That's smart. It allows for integration. It allows for development of corporate governance improvements, and it's a sort of market testing, if you will. So this stage model mirrors what we saw in the UK and in successful CE privatizations elsewhere, where the state transitions from a full ownership position to a minority shareholder with a strong regulatory oversight and clear market rules. And finally, I want to say, and of course I would say, that the legal framework is really the enabler of any of these transactions. Ultimately, no privatization can succeed unless the legal environment is predictable. In Russia, we saw some capable buyers walk away or undervalue deals due to legal ambiguity or risk of post-sale disputes or renationalization. By contrast, I think what we saw in places like the UK was the privatization process benefited from clear regulatory regimes, enforceable contracts, because after all, English law is the lingua franca of the business community, and long-term policy stability of the government. I think Uzbekistan is working actively on this. We see efforts to improve the law in many areas that are important to privatization: dispute resolution, contract enforcement, minority shareholder protections, and perhaps most importantly, capital markets regulation, which is the backbone of all of this. These aren't just technical reforms. They directly impact asset valuation and investor interest. So what I like to say, to sum it up, is each method, IPO, trade sale, buyout, has its place. What matters most is that it's matched with proper governance, legal clarity, and competitive integrity. Uzbekistan is moving at pace, but it's not rushing through the process. It's sequencing the reforms, which I think is important. It's engaging serious partners and international partners, and it's strengthening its institutions along the way. That's what gives me confidence as an external observer, and what should give investors comfort in looking seriously at this country today. Thank you.
Thank you, David. And I think what you and Giovanni said, when these transactions are done at speed, always have major issues with them and can fail. So the deliberate and considered approach the agency is taking, I think, is welcomed by everybody looking at this process. But whatever the privatization method, obviously leadership, and as David's just referred to, and Giovanni, governance will be critical areas that investors will look at as they evaluate either an IPO or indeed an investment directly into what is a state-owned asset. So let me ask Tariq about that tradition, the transition that CEOs have to embrace almost culturally to make privatization a success, moving from a single state shareholder to multiple shareholders, sometimes competing shareholders, in the interest of private sector investors. Tariq.
Bismillah ar-Rahman Rahim. First of all, I'd like to thank the organizer for giving me the opportunity to share my thoughts and congratulations on a successful summit forum here. And let me just introduce very briefly that we CEO Club Network worldwide has been more than 3 decades old organization from US with our regional office in Dubai for more than 19 years under the patronage of His Highness the Prime Minister family. And we are connecting businesses, connecting CEOs, the high executives, high network individuals, even government entities. You know, we are connecting globally, not only locally, regionally, globally. And we have been very successful, and I'm very thankful that we are working very closely with Uzbekistan now and trying to promote and bring investment into this lovely country. What you asked the question, Andrew, is I think the transition from the ownership to the privatization is profound shift for any organization. I think particularly for CEOs, when they are state-owned enterprise, you know, they move towards the privatization is a different role, and the CEO changes dramatically because how the CEO's mindsets are, leadership styles, strategic focus, and involve in make privatization a success. The CEOs are typically accountable to a single shareholder like government, you know, but goals may include different scenarios, economic objectives such as employment, public services, delivery, or regional development, and it plays a very different role. The new reality is now the CEOs is now answerable to multiple private shareholders, each with diverse and other often driven interest, and I think performance is measured by the financial results. You know, when shareholder value and market the competitiveness and just policy compliance and a public sector. And the CEO must learn the balance, the short-term investor expectations with long-term strategic goals. A major cultural and operational is also very important. Definitely the state-owned governance is often bureaucratic and politically influenced, but slower decision making and less corporate government. But in the private sector, as you know, that is stronger board oversight, transparency, and independency. You know, compliance definitely with corporate government codes, financial disclosure, multiple things. It's very important. The CEO must build a high-performing board and very embrace transparency and ensure the company aligned on the market, the standards and everything else. The leadership definitely of any organization plays a very top role and has to be limited internal challenges that they face and emphasize on compliance and procedures and everything else. In a private sector, definitely leadership must be more dynamic, commercially and stakeholder focused and everything else. The CEO must also, as a CEO, I'm mentioning it because I'm a CEO club, you know, that's what I'm multiple times I'm mentioning that, that more entrepreneur, accountable, and communicate leadership style, that they must lead the organization in a culture change and different ways that what is the focus on. Broader scenario economic goals with the focus on profitability, operational efficiency, and sometimes tolerated on different ways. Strategy must be market driven and also competitive awareness. The CEO must drive a seamless operation and make a data-driven and customer-oriented decisions. Communication is often internally or government facing is very important. Limited experience in managing public and investor is also plays a key role. Regular engagement with analysts, investors, and the media is also a crucial role. So narrative around growth, value, and risk management must be reliable. I would say that privatization often creates internal uncertainty. Employees may fear job losses, culture shifts, or losing long-held privileges and everything else. But I think it will become a change leader, providing a vision, building trust and engaging the workforce in adopt and conference. And I would say privatization is not just a transition, it is a transformation for CEOs and high leadership is to success depend on their ability to evolve from politically 10 bureaucrats to commercially minded leader, build new systems of governance and also accountability, which is very important. We all have to ensure the trust and capital market, and also drive a new performance culture across the organization. The CEOs is a bridge between the organization, the legacy, and the future. And the transition must be led by the courage, clarity, and competitiveness. If I focus on Uzbekistan, that I think it's added a valuable context, especially given a government active push towards the market liberalization and privatization. I think it's a very good move, and also the many Uzbek stakeholders are now entering into global investment rulers. And I think the privatization is a very good move because that will bring the international private organizations to be a part of it. And I think when you bring the international players in the privatization, you bring not only a global vision, you also bring the global expertise, that also enhance the local businesses and in a different way. And it is very important. And also I want to mention at this time that, having this privatization policies, regulations, and everything else, but I think maybe the Uzbekistan also should be considering it, bringing in international consultancy companies, international stakeholders, to be advisor, to be to enhance the current privatization procedure and everything else. That might also help to enhance and expedite their plans and everything else. Because I think nowadays we're living in a world where the time is running very fast. What we used to do in years, now we do in months. So I think we all have to utilize our time, get other people's expertise, learn from their experience, and join hands and in every way possible to enhance our role and everything else. So definitely, I think the leadership is very important, and I would say delegate authority to empower middle management and multiple things is very important. But I would say it's my role that I've been playing a bridging between the CEOs and different entities, multinational to SMEs to startups, and currently technology, the AI, all those buzzwords going on. I think those mergers and acquisitions and people are looking into those industries. I think that would be incorporated in privatization process. AI can play a very key role into enhancing any industry, any way that to not only in the process of privatization, to enhance the process of privatization, and if they incorporate technology somehow in their system and in their policies and everything else. So that's what I wanted to share my thoughts. Thank you very much for giving me the time.
Thank you, Tariq, and thanks for really raising the importance ultimately of governance. I mean, I think I've advised over my career on about 30 IPOs, and governance has absolutely been top of the list for investors in every single one. And most corporate issues or problems that emerge are ultimately a failure of governance, including, for instance, BP's disastrous environmental issues in the Gulf of Mexico a few years ago. That was ultimately a failure of governance. So thank you, Tariq, for that. Now, having looked at privatizations in general, I'd now like to briefly focus on a sector where we almost certainly see high levels of activity: banking. And I'd like to ask Alan to give us some examples from the banking sector about the need and scope for institutional strengthening ahead of a privatization transaction around governance, commercial sharpness, looking at return on capital. What are the priorities a state-owned asset should be looking at sharpening ahead of an actual transaction? Alan.
Thank you, Andrew, and hello, everyone. Very important to mention, to start with, the fact that we at the International Finance Corporation, the private sector arm of the World Bank Group, are not so much known for the role we play beyond providing development finance. And in fact, we are in some markets, and it's been the case for Uzbekistan, we do play a major role in supporting institutional strengthening, including transforming institutions that are getting prepared for privatization. And this has been the case in Uzbekistan, where we've been embarked in the pre-privatization support preparedness of 3 major banking institutions, one of which has actually already been privatized. This is Hipoteca, for those that got bought over by OTP following a successful transformational work that was led by us. So we believe it's important to understand the scope of what is being done as we get public sector institutions, especially public sector banks, prepared for privatization, whether the privatization ends up being through straight sale, an IPO, or a management buyout. What we believe is important is actually 4 pillars. One pillar has to do with strategy, culture, and governance. The second pillar has to do with front office or sales management. The third pillar has got to do with middle and back office support. And the fourth pillar concerns the kind of funding which is required to support this transformation work, right? And these 4 pillars were specifically covered with the 3 bank institutions in Uzbekistan by IFC. And talking a little bit about each of the pillars, starting with the cultural strategy and corporate governance, important to highlight the fact that moving away from a centralized state-driven banking institution to one that is embarking into a commercialized practices, required quite some cultural change, and this is was captured in specific organizational change support provided to these banks. It was captured into a specific strategic change development, articulation and implementation in a form of a specific strategic project, the setting up of a dedicated project management office to lead that strategic change. It also involved quite some governance enhancements, both at the board and also at executive management. We did play a major role in increasing diversity and competence at board level, including independence, which was lacking. We did enforce the renewal of executive teams, hiring internationally beyond just some local hires, considering the challenge of having some banking expertise in the local market. And we did also emphasize on going about reviewing a number of governance practice away from a centralized government approach, which was largely policy driven. On the front office and sale management, we did have to focus on how much these organizations were prepared to develop a market strategy that involved catering for a specific segment of the markets, whether it is SME, corporate banking, business banking. And in fact, most of the banks which have been state-controlled have been focusing a lot on large businesses as opposed to medium and small-sized enterprises. So the MSME strategy was key in developing the appetite to take more risk in the MSME segment. Also, developing business lines like climate finance was very important. And one of the banks that was supported ended up being a large, one of the major banks in Uzbekistan for climate finance. It was also important to lead these banks into targeting more private sector deposits, because most of them used to depend on large deposits from public sector entities. So that being able to develop a deposit mobilization strategy targeting private sector was key in that endeavor. Thirdly, looking at the medium and back office support, the end goal here was to enhance the operating efficiency of these institutions. It was about making sure that they embark into a more credible financial reporting format. And this is an important point, considering the fact that a number of privatization got challenged by the valuation of assets. So being able to have these organizations embark into not only IFRS reporting, but also asset quality review by independent auditors became very important in the process. We also realized that it was important for these organizations to develop a more of an optimal operating structure, especially considering the branch network. Lots of these banks had numerous branch outlets that were not productive, so branch centralization and optimization became key in this endeavor. Next, we did look at what kind of funding support was required by these institutions as they went through this transition. And therefore, some of these strategic investment required for the transformation needed to be supported by us, and also expanding their market reach towards some specific segments like MSME, climate finance, gender finance. We needed to provide some dedicated financing to support that. And last but not the least, we needed to also invest into convertible loan instruments so that we could feature as a potential shareholder. And this was very important because it sent a signal to the market that IFC is sort of adding its stamp of approval or confidence to the institutions that are meant to be privatized. So for the three banking institutions, we have the preparedness, the readiness of these state-owned banks as they get, prepared for privatization. And one thing to add is that once they were able to identify a private sector investor, like in the case of Hipoteca, these did not prevent us from continuing support, because then the new investor needed to go through an adjustment phase, in terms of adaptation of new policies to the new organization, which we continue to support in the case of Hipoteca, for instance. So very important to understand, therefore, the scope, the required change in culture, governance, operations, to be an attractive target for privatization, and this is what we have been successful achieving with the three institutions mentioned.
Thank you, Alan. So a real appetite for change is critical to success. That was very interesting. Examples from the banking sector. But looking out again, perhaps from the broader perspective, privatization objectives are multiple. They can at times be competing, and their relative importance has varied from country to country, and even within the same country. So I'd like to go back to where we started the discussion and ask Enrico, what does he believe the core policy objectives should be for the government as it drives privatization here in Uzbekistan? Should it prioritize developing local capital markets? Should it prioritize increasing efficiency of these assets? Should it be to simply maximize valuation? Should it be a tool for integrating the country into the global economy? Enrico, what's your view?
Thanks, Andrew, and I'm glad to be back in a country that hosted me for several years, and I'm actually quite impressed by the fact that this event, I was at the very first one, this event has grown quite a bit in size and attendance, so I think this is a signal that there is investor interested in privatization, but in investment overall. Now, the question you asked me, Andrew, I don't pretend to be a policymaker for the government, as much as, of course, I have my own idea, and maybe I would like to maybe stress the fact that all the policy objectives you highlighted, they're not really mutually exclusive. So, for instance, you talked about capital markets. So there is indeed an ambition to deepen the capital market domestically and have more listings in the Tashkent Stock Exchange. ADB ourselves, we had several programs already on, we call it financial market development programs, where we really target all the measures that can be put in place to broaden, deepen, and also diversify an investor base. Now, the government itself had developed several programs, but I remember one fondly, which was the People's IPO program. This is really, by name itself, if I recall correctly, it's an attempt to democratize the private ownership of these public assets. But also, I think the idea really was somehow twofold, because on one side, and I hope I don't make many people laugh here, but for many years, you had what I think I used to call myself the mattress bank. You have a lot of money in your mattress. And so the idea was, how do we maybe use this tool of the IPOs to mobilize those unutilized funds that are held by the population to invest them in really the real economy, right? But the other thing, and I think this goes back to some of the statement that we made they were made before. This, for instance, People's IPO, I think it was an attempt, and is still an attempt, to increase the awareness and the interest to these assets, and really to cultivate the investment culture within the country. For many years, the stock market was never an option, right? So, and I think this is a really important thing, because you try to mobilize the population to participate in the capital market. Again, looking at the cultural aspect, I cover the whole of Asia, and this is definitely a culture here is not a gambling culture yet. At least I hope it will not become a full gambling culture. But really, the working and playing in the stock market itself, it's not yet developed as a culture to go invest, trade, be very active. If you look at the turnovers and in the capital markets, it's slow, and sometimes you see delisting and relisting. So the culture has to be formed to some extent. But I also would like to, be a bit honest here, realizing the fact that you're at this point in time, if you take the IPO route, you have to understand you're competing with fundamentally a banking sector that offer you return on deposits that's quite high. I mean, the last time, I remember 20-25% on short-term deposit. So the moment you as an investor, you want to create this culture, you need to have an investment that can give you at least some very good dividends, predictable dividends, that can match the type of return you can get from a pure bank account, right? So the IPO route, the developing capital markets is there. We're all working hard for that. However, there are systemic factors that we have to take into consideration, and that will make this process a bit gradual, I would say. Now, the other the other policy aspect that you were referring to is the value maximization. As I think most of the panelists agree, the privatization, you really target a way to maximize the value of the sale proceeds that you getting from the SOE you're privatizing. But I think in the Uzbek context, there's also, because of the large size of the SOE, there's also a complementary policy objective, which is really how do we diminish the budget transfer, the subsidies that you give to this SOE world, because you have a growing population, you have growing needs, and then you can move away from utilizing the funds for this SOE support to other purposes that are more socially inclusive and maybe to some extent more policy important. Then I subscribe to what our friend here from IFC, our colleagues. I think we also have to realize that there are a lot of SOEs, and not all the SOEs are ready to be privatized. So all this preparation work is very important, and that's we somehow try to stress a magic word to make this preparation work more enticing, which is commercialization. How do we commercialize? How do we bring this SOE to that level of efficiency, the level of productivity, that then the moment you decide to bring it to the market, you're going to get the best value from that asset. And this preparatory work goes a bit sometimes against the speed that you would like to have in this process, but definitely on the longer term, it might give you the higher return that we're looking for as in terms of value maximization. Now, there's another point that I think I subscribe for what Rothschild and other people have highlighted here, and the timing. Is it a good time to privatize? Do we have investors? I remember, as I said, in the Eastern Europe, there was a time there was a rush to buy banks. There was a rush to buy other utilities. Is it a good time now? We have geopolitics tension. You have, of course, we go to COVID and other factors. So we have good examples, but it is not. The timing. Sometimes the preparatory work might be more important because there will be better time to privatize. So I think this is a judgment call that when you look at the policy choice you're going to make, you have to look at what is the context right now. Now, finally, I think you also wanted to see whether this is a policy to integrate Uzbekistan in the world economy. Now, I would say for strategic investors, for strategic sectors, I think the attempt to attract strategic investors has something that has delivered some success. Our friends in OTP have taken Hipoteca, Indorama with the fertilizer. So there are success stories on strategic sectors. And by attracting this strategic investor, you also have the at least implicit expectation that you're going to connect to their value chains internationally, and you make yourself more integrated in the global economy. So I think in general, if we go for that strategic investor, and is somebody that will bring that expertise and will bring the knowledge transfer, also bring the knowledge in how do we connect to the international value chains. The other and final point on this, I also would like to highlight that, for definitely the people that are here, they know the companies, but for investors that maybe come for the first or second time here, there are what I will call blue chips company. There are very good Uzbek companies. You have very good, I'm going to cite a couple of those, the mining company, gold and copper, that they have the capacity to attract investors. They have the capacity to list both domestically and internationally. It's actually, I think recently there was, if I'm not mistaken, there was a decree by the president that indicated there were about 12 companies, overseas, targeted for dual listing. Now, is that going to happen tomorrow? Maybe not. Some, as I said, are more ready. The two SOEs that I just mentioned, the mining company, they went to the market for Euro bonds. Not only they were very successful, but they even got 3 or 4 or 5 times oversubscribed. So the appetite is there for the blue chips and ready company. However, I go back to that point. Not all of the 12 companies, not all the SOEs are ready to be listed, are ready to get into the international market. So the preparatory work, that's where I see, for instance, the role of us and other advisors to help them get to that level where you hit the market, you gain the visibility, and you're ready to be invested on. So I think, I guess I didn't make the policy for the government, but definitely I give you some food for thought on what will be, again, some of the policy objectives that needs to be streamlined when thinking about privatizing. Again, the SOE bucket is very big, but there are a lot of differentiation within that bucket and a lot of policy choices that can be made. And that's where all of us are here to work with the authorities to try to help them make an informed decision on this privatization going forward.
Thank you very much, Enrico. Very interesting. And a little plug for Hudson Sandler here. I think one of the areas of preparation we've not really talked about is how companies present themselves and how they begin to build awareness of their propositions internationally. I would say at least a couple of years before an actual transaction, and that's, of course, where we come in. Now I'm going to ask any questions from the audience. Okay, well, I'm conscious of time, so I just thought I'd finish off with one question for Giovanni. Giovanni, Rothschilds advised the National Investment Fund in Romania, which was managed by Franklin Templeton, which was I think, partly the model for the fund that's been introduced here in Uzbekistan. Can you talk a little bit about, you see the role of that fund in this whole process of taking state assets to international investors, and how you see the role the fund could play in that?
Well, sure. Actually, there is a person which is better placed to speak about this than me, sitting in the room over there, which was involved. But of course, I was aware and following the situation as a colleague. And I think in the context of what was Romania at the time, in the 90s, it was quite a successful experience with companies which were maybe not run in the most efficient way, benefiting from an external, more experienced investor, at the same time maintaining a certain level of independency. And it resulted in a very significant transaction, I think, where we advised, actually my colleagues here, Ariel was advising 2 years ago, I believe. It was the IPO of one of the biggest IPO which took place in Europe, which was Hydroelectrica. It was a $10 billion IPO. And it was a result of this, of a fondo proprietario activities was pretty good. I understand also, and we are aware, and we are in contact with Franklin Templeton here in Tashkent. They are repeating the experience here. Of course, it's different country, different times, different approaches, but I think the recipe remains good, and I think there are all the premises for this to be a success. It might take a bit of time, as it did in Romania, because there are certain companies which are more or less prepared for modernization and sale, eventually privatization. But I think the recipe is good for this type of companies. Yeah, I think actually in Uzbekistan there are big companies which kind of don't need this type of sponsoring, and they're extremely equipped to be significant players, world-class assets in the international financial sector. So I think there are already some good examples of companies which, as I mentioned earlier, could facilitate putting Uzbekistan on the map. Besides the one managed by Franklin Templeton, which are kind of
Thank you, Giovanni.
smaller.
And finally, Akmal, if I may finish with you, please. A question about should a discount be offered to local purchasers of these assets, either retail investors in an IPO or strategic investors buying into a state asset? I know in the UK privatization programme, retail investors were given a discount to encourage wider share ownership. Your views on that would be very interesting.
Katta rahmat, albatta.
Thank you. Of course, yes, it is very important. We should support domestic investors and our people. We should increase the access of local population to state assets. That is why our president has set the goal for us that we should, of course, more concerned about our people, and we should increase the share of owners among Uzbek people. And that's why it was our task to launch this program, IPO for People. And last year we have launched the first IPO for people. More than 3 million shares were sold to people. And in this case, nearly 12,000 people purchased those shares, and only 4%. It was just 4% out of the entire amount of the shares, and 12,000 people purchased those shares, and now they are the shareholders. And this means that and it was not a huge share in one company. No, those were like minor shares in multiple of companies, and we created this opportunity, this access to the shares. And also when it comes to real estate, then we are trying to also privatize the real estate, state-owned real estate. They are also sold via auctions, and it stays there on sale for 3-6 months, and if no one wants to buy, then the price will be reduced. And that's how we stimulate the people ownership. And of course the process is contemporary and transparent.
Thank you very much, Director.
Спасибо.
Very encouraging. It's been a very interesting discussion. I'd like to thank all the panelists for their contributions today. I'd like to thank you all for attending the panel, and I hope you enjoy the rest of the afternoon and have a good evening. Thank you.
test 1 2 3 4 5 1 1 1